Hi everyone, Amber Lyn here. I am here today with Patrick Doyle. He is an author, a coach, and a good friend of mine who has been along this journey, this music journey with me. And I'm grateful to have you here today to talk about the story behind Headphones, the song that I did. And you were pretty pivotal in the process with me in that journey of that song. So thank you for coming today. And
Yeah. Well, I'm privileged actually to be a part of what you created and what with great perseverance, created and then made happen, coming to fruition in the release of the song today. And you know, I'm excited to tell the story, and I think others will be inspired by the story that you're going to tell about how this came about. It's actually quite more amazing how all these things happened, and like many people say, these things have a life of their own.
yeah, some of the people I've worked with in the music industry call it music magic because it
Definitely
really
some of
is.
that here.
Yeah, so it's really interesting taking an idea of a song from the story that inspired it, moving that to production and then launching it. Every song has its own story, and so I just thought it'd be really fun to have you on and talk about this song's story. So,
Yes, yes, it's a
I'm
great
gonna go ahead.
story.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started on it, and then if you want to chime in or if you have any questions or anything that you remember, I would love to hear your perspective on it too, because obviously
Okay,
we're going to have different perspectives on the story. But
sure.
so basically, the story Headphones came because I used to volunteer, and I know you used to be a part of an organization called You for Christ, where you help youth and you go in and you make relationships with them. A lot of times, the youth are struggling, they come from broken homes, from addiction, it can be a lot of things. And I had met this girl. Her first name is Leticia. I won't give her a last name just because of privacy reasons. But we had developed a connection through You for Christ. And um, one day, it was during wintertime here in our area. I had gotten off work and went to the grocery store to shop and get, some necessary things for dinner. And as I was
But
walking out, yeah.
wasn't it close to Christmas?
Yeah, it was cold. December, week before Christmas.
Okay,
Yeah,
week before
definitely.
Christmas, right?
Yeah, that's a good point to bring in the story for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but as I was checking out, pushing my cart, I looked over and right at the exit doors was Leticia. And it was interesting because she was there with her cousin and like two other adults, but they had like bags of clothes hanging out and I or bags of something. I'd assume they were clothes. I didn't know. And both the kids, they were teens at the time, had their backpacks on and they're like, "Hey Amber." And we kind of struck up like short conversation, small talk, and I said, "Hey, what's going on? What are you guys doing?" They're like, "Oh, we got so nonchalantly, we got evicted out of our home." And
Mm.
I said, what do you mean you got evicted? And she said, well, I got out of school and there's an eviction notice on our apartment door. And I said, well, what are you guys gonna do? And again, like to your point, it's December, it's cold, they're in a grocery store, like where are they gonna go? And so they said, well, our parents, they're gonna go stay with somebody in the backyard. I don't even know. I mean, they're not well, clearly they're addicts. And I said, well, where are you guys gonna go? And they're like, we're not really sure yet. And I said, well, you're coming with me. And so they hopped in the car with me, and I was able to find a place for the boy, her cousin. There's a place called Hearts with a Mission here locally that shelters teens and stuff that are homeless. And they didn't have room for girls, though. They were totally filled up for the girls. And so she stayed with me for like 3 days. But, it's one of those things where it's hard to put into words like and maybe you could help me, the difficulty that I saw on the kids. They were fearful. There was a lot of like not really knowing where they were going to go. It's towards Christmas time. And so it's like they would like kind of laugh about things, but then also like get really quiet. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, you know this from your own experience and from working with youth, but from my own experience, both personally and then also have been worked with a lot of youth as well, the level of pain that they are in
Hmm.
that they can't even articulate. They don't even know. They don't have words. They don't even know half of it. They're like, it really sucks, but it sucks way more than they think, or that they're conscious of. So when you're around them, you just see this sort of like shell shocked version of the person
Hmm.
and their need for distraction.
Yes, and
It's
that leads
both
me.
with a high levels of pain.
Yes,
And,
and
and
that leads me to my point. Is that's how she would cope
but
was
hold on.
okay.
Let's just talk about for a second the fact that you just out of nowhere said, "Come with me."
Mm,
Like the healing of that for that girl and that boy, for someone to just take them in when their parents are clearly rejecting them because they're too strung out on whatever.
yeah.
So the beauty of that gesture that was meaningful and real, you leave the side of the road and you come to a warm home with somebody who actually cares about you.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, that's monumental.
Well, and it's crazy you say that. I appreciate you validating that, but for me, it was like a no-brainer. Like I didn't feel like I'm obviously I have that choice, to not do that. But for me and my history and coming from a home of addicts, also, I was like, these kids need a place to go. I'm taking them. Like there was no other option in my head to other than where are they going to go? I'm not going to let them just stay here in a grocery store when we have a relationship and they could just come home with me, right?
But just so you know, that's not everybody. A lot of people will be like, "That's too much for me to deal with. I gotta move on. Like I can't do this."
I don't see them in the corner of my eye.
In fact, a lot of people have been like, "I don't know them. I don't know them. I don't want to get involved." That's actually more prominent than what you did, which is so caring and so loving and so genuine. But like you said, it comes from a place where you know what it felt like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I knew what it felt like, and which is why one of the reasons I worked with youth for so long and addicts as I did, because I was trying to give to that world so I could change it,
Hmm.
right? But you know as well as I do, we have limitations. We can't. There's the magic wands. We can't just make their situation better. But what you did was, uh, you know, epic level care. So kudos for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
But I
But
know
yeah,
you weren't thinking that at the
no,
time.
I was like, we'll just figure it out. Like, you need a place to stay tonight, and then we'll figure out from there. So, sitting down and talking with them and trying to pull out, like, who are your resources? Who can we contact? Like, trying to help them with that, which really should be the parents' position. But the parents were the problem, and that's why they're in this situation, and we're talking like 15, 16 year olds. So, it's just horrible. A kid should never have to worry about where they're going to go home at night, especially in a December cold 1 week before Christmas. Like, are you kidding me? So,
Correct.
anyways, I was grateful that we were able to find a place for the boy. But for her, yeah, it was the shelter was full, and so she was with me for I think 2 or 3 nights. I can't remember exactly. It was like years ago, but. And one of the things I really noticed about her is she's very like kind of tomboy, baggy sweats, baggy sweatshirt. She would wear like this hood, and then she would always have like headphones on. And one time that one of that during that night I said, what are you listening to? And she says like hip hop, like rap. And it was interesting the time that we got to spend together. I saw her like weave in and out of like feeling the pain of the reality of what's going on, but also like checking out through the music and the headphones. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I can totally relate to this growing up and needing music. What about you
Yeah.
in that
Oh my
way?
God. Laying on the floor with headphones on, listening to, I mean, there are a couple albums that just saved my life because I was so internally distraught. So relate to that process of like the music being the solace, you know, and the need for that because my world was so chaotic and there's so many dangerous people or uncaring people around me. I could totally relate to that, and that's why I relate to the song. Like, you know, there's some of the lines in the song like describe my reality when I was a young person. So I think it's really important to let that be.
Yeah, and I did. I just, we didn't always have conversations there that time, me and her, but I just was with her in that as we got her, clothes and we found her grandma and ultimately I ended up dropping her off at her grandma's apartment and just letting it go. And but again, she would listen to hip hop and rap, and so I kept in this process hearing these lyrics, like headphones in, hip hop's a playing, I got nowhere to go but inside these headphones. And at the time I was a newer like songwriter and singer, and just figured out that I could write songs. And so I was like, wow, this is not getting out of my head. So I dropped her off and said goodbye. Not again, just not really knowing what would happen to her. And I just knew like whatever this song that's stirring in me, like I need to get it down, write it, and I want to get it recorded. And so I ultimately did do that. I wrote the rest of the lyrics, and they just kind of like came to me. And my whole thing I wanted to do in honor of her was to have a bit of like a hip hop version of this song. But I'm not a hip hop like artist. Like I didn't even know I was an artist at the time. I'm more like a pop kind of, artist. So at least that's what people are telling me.
Yeah.
So anyways, I went on the whole adventure of like trying to figure out how to even get a song recorded. Like, you're new to the industry. I didn't know I could write songs. So how do you even get a song recorded? Started reaching out to producers and just did not have really great luck. We're talking like Grammy nominated producers. I liked their style. And then I would sit and have interviews with them. And it was just horrible interactions. And what I mean by horrible is like, they're not really listening to me. They don't really care about your vision. They are like, you have a great voice and this is how it should sound. And that was it, like, period. And so with that, I was feeling very discouraged and a bit like, is this something I want to do? Like, is the industry really this difficult? Like, to even like collaborate and like get a song recorded? With that is so meaningful to me and for her too,
Yeah. But see if I can understand this. Like, so you were very new to the whole process of songwriting
Oh yeah,
and music
and recording.
and recording, but yet, so when you go to a producer and you've produced nothing, like you don't have, you had won an award by now for songwriting,
Right. That's how
right?
I was like, oh, maybe I can write songs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but in the recording world, I mean, like it's all about who you are.
Who you are, who you know,
Yep.
how much
So
money you have.
you were an amateur, quote unquote, from their
Yeah.
perspective, right? So it makes the hurdle higher. If you're Dolly Parton, everybody wants to work with you, right?
Well, they
Or
wanted to
you're,
work with me, but it was like under these conditions.
yes.
And, and
Well,
I just
that's
thought,
that was my whole point. Like if Dolly Parton shows up, you're going to listen to her.
right,
If somebody
exactly.
unvetted shows up, you're going to tell them what they should do.
Yeah, and I'm sure I came across pretty insecure because I definitely was too. I wasn't very confident, and I knew what kind of vision I wanted, but I didn't know how to like express that or put terms or words to that. Like it's very interesting trying to figure out how to explain what's in your head to a producer, like what you're hearing.
And particularly when you're talking about nuances, not like overtly obvious things. It's lots of nuances you're trying to express.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, felt super discouraged and all that. And then I ended up coming across an organization called Itty Ditty, and basically one of the owners and founders of the company, she went through the same thing as an artist, as a female artist, because it's even tougher as a female in the
Correct.
industry.
Correct.
It's very male dominated, especially, and not that I'm like against that or anything, but it is, you have to stand up and have a little bit more of a tough skin, like Dolly Parton. I mean,
Yeah.
she's a badass in that way.
She
And
is.
yeah, exactly. And now I get it. And that was back then. It's probably even worse back then,
Mm,
I imagine.
yeah.
Harder for her. So, anyways, I loved her vision, the owner of this company. And basically, what they do is they match make artists and producers together.
What
But
a great
these are
idea.
vetted artists
Yeah.
and vetted producers. And that was one of the hardest things for me, is like I had to vet all these producers and meet with them, and maybe even sign contracts and find out later that like this is not a good fit. But
Mm,
she's already done that work to vet, are
wow.
these kind people, are
Mm,
they open, are they safe,
right.
and will they be willing to collaborate and listen to an artist, and vice versa. Will an artist be open, kind, do they have a level of talent, so I feel like she did a little bit of that work for me, and I'm like, let's try this out. Signed up for it. She took my song and she sent it out to the 100 or so. I forget how many producers she has, to the song, and then basically any producers who are interested, they contact her, and then I get to vet if I want to work with them at that
That's
point.
awesome.
Yeah, so it was cool because she calls me up and she said, Amber, I just got to let you know, like, we've never had such interest in a song before. And so I had, and you actually helped me. We had multiple producers to go through and look through their stuff and find out, like, who would match style wise the best for this.
Hmm.
You remember that?
I do. And I don't know, people probably don't know this, but in a previous life, when I was much younger, one of my jobs was I was a concert promoter and a booking agent. So, and one of the things I was tasked with in the company I worked for was trying to find talent, like to sign to the label or to sign to the management side. So it's always been something that I've done, but to be in the side where you're talking about like trying to understand the relationship between you and a producer that makes sense, that is so key because that can have such a profound impact on the product, what you end up with, right? And so that process, I mean, itty bitty, like their vision is, I think, genius. Like so many artists, and particularly in today's world where so many people have talent and can do it at a computer, but don't have really the production skills. Like you can learn that stuff, but there's a reason why epic producers are epic producers. They have a skill that not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a very I noticed for you it was a very difficult process to try to be able to communicate with them and understand what they were saying and communicate your vision but perseverance being what it is, you found what you needed.
Yeah, and I actually found two of what I wanted and needed, which I didn't expect that, but it was between two producers, Sarah Walk and Stephen Colin. And Sarah Walk lives in Hollywood. She's an artist also, has this phenomenal voice.
Yeah.
Stephen plays multiple instruments and he's in Canada. I'm like, can you get any more polar opposite from each other? But I was so excited. I'm like, I can't, again, just trusting your instincts on this, I can't decide between the two. So we're going to do two versions. So I did more of a cinematic version with Sarah. It was really fun working with her and then going to her studio in Hollywood. And then Steven, we did a lot of just the remote stuff. And he's the one that really helped do the hip hop version. And I think he did a really great job. Like, again, as a newer artist, it's really hard to communicate like what the vision is, and so you
Yes.
use these terms that you even ask some of the producers. Like, I bet you hear the craziest like terms for certain noises and stuff. Like, how do you figure that out?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, Steve and I had a hard time really capturing that vision. And at the time, Lance Carpenter, he's a number one songwriter in the country world genre, and he was actually coaching me at the time as part of his program. And I told him like I'm struggling because I don't really know how to lead him on like where I'm wanting to go, and I think he's doing a great job of listening. But and I'll never forget what he said. He said, he said, Amber, tell him to scrap all the notes I've given you and start fresh and make this the most badass, beat-driven, hip-hop, R&B song possible. Take the reins off and see what he does. And I did. And I said, that's great advice. Let's see what he pulls out. And he did. He just let his creative side come out. And he's been very pivotal. I mean, Lance was pivotal in helping me communicate to Steven and
Yeah.
giving Steven that freedom to be creative. And then we got to collaborate on that. That was really
Sure.
cool. So
Yeah.
I had to let go a little bit of that, what I wanted a little bit, and see what he could come up with. And it ended up being almost perfect of what I wanted as far as hip
Well,
hop.
isn't it interesting how letting go and giving someone the freedom to do their thing actually created the thing you wanted.
Yeah, it's true.
It's such a, that's what you said earlier was like music magic.
Yeah,
That's that collaboration. He was inspired by your lyrics and what you talked about, and then you turned him loose and he created this thing. You're like,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, nothing's ever perfect, but
No.
closer than we were, right?
Yeah, and some of the best advice I've gotten in regards to recording with producers and collaborating is your relationship with a producer is kind of like a marriage. Like, it's a relationship, And so you're learning how to communicate with each other. And I think that was the basis for me when I'm having interviews with these producers. Is this someone that I could have a cup of coffee with and just like build a relationship with? And I don't mean like a romantic one, but even just like a friendship, and
Yes.
relationship being that
Mhm.
the foundation for the
Yeah.
music.
Well, I've understood through my experiences that the safety emotionally and relationally is the foundation for the creative process. If you don't feel safe or heard or seen, it's way harder to be vulnerable with what you're seeing, what you're creating. And it's funny you use the analogy of, producer and artist is like a marriage. It's even worse than that. We're married and we're making a child.
Yeah.
So, and you know how we feel how important our children are. So
Yeah.
that heightens all the intensity because something is so important. And you as an artist is like you're like giving this thing that you birthed to someone else and they have to handle it with care.
Yeah.
So that reality, I think separates the great producers from the not so great producers. You
Mm.
can be technically skilled but relationally not so skilled and be a terrible producer because you can't hear.
Yeah. Or see the other person
Right.
or artist
Exactly.
or any of
Huge.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you relate it to like a child because it is true. It's like, although, the vision was given to me and then I'm pairing up with somebody else to kind of capture that vision, but also participate in that with their own gifts.
Hmm.
But then also the child has its own way of like the song finds its way, and
Yes.
you don't have control over that either. So for a perfectionist in recovery, this is like a nightmare. Like seriously, because I don't have control over anything other than I have a vision. I do need to protect that because I feel like that was given to me, but I have to hold everything else loosely, and that's part of the music magic is like seeing where an idea could go because it does change. Like,
Right. Okay, so you have this amazing moment, these amazing days with Leticia. You get inspired by that process. You write a song. Then you go through all this work, you go through all this vetting, and you find two people, and then you record two different versions of the song. And then what?
hmm yeah, so I got the final mixes back with Sarah. That one got completed first. I'd also want to put out there that there's a financial expense in recording music, and I made a huge jump thinking I'm going to do two versions now, but I'm not sure I can afford that. And I just keep bumping my mic. A good friend of mine said, Amber, how much is it for the second version? And I gave her the number. She's like, done. And so I just wanted to like put that out there that like when you talk about like a whole team and like this music magic thing, like the reason why headphones hip hop versions even exist is because of my friend Lou, who invested financially. She's always believed in me from the very beginning before I even believed in myself. So she funded that completely, so I
That's
didn't even have
awesome.
to worry about that and just put my energy into it creatively. And so I really thank you again, Lou, for being a part of that. I'm just super grateful. So, anyways, got Sarah's version, and then I was able to find. There's a whole story about how I had to find a mixer or a master for headphones, which I won't go totally into. But I basically got a message from the guy that finally did the final mixes on headphones after Steven and I worked on the production side of it. And I remember that day I was like, oh my gosh, like I just got the final mixes for the last version. Like this is exciting. And I was just kind of like taking that in and taking a breath, like, oh my gosh, this was so much work to like get going and to finally finish. What was kind of crazy is like this was probably 4 years after, about 4 years after I had dropped off Leticia at her grandma's house, and I had not heard from her or seen her since then. So I had no idea where she was at, if she was doing well. She didn't have a cell phone. I didn't know how to contact her. So on the day, this is talk about music magic here. I had clothes in the back of my car that had been sitting in the back of my car for months that I need to take to Goodwill. You know how it is. They just kind of
Hmm.
sit there until it's like convenient to stop and drop them off. And I thought, I just got the call from the mixer that it's final. It's in your inbox and all your copies. And I was like, thank you so much. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna go home and relax and celebrate with my family, but I'm gonna stop at Goodwill first and drop off these clothes. It's on the way. Why not? I go and I pull up, and this girl comes out and with her little cart to put the clothes in, and I look at her name tag and it says Leticia, and it's very unique spelling. Okay, at least Leticia isn't too uncommon of a name, but
Yeah.
the spelling is, and I recognize that right off, and I just went like that, and I look up at her face, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's the girl. And she's not a girl anymore. She's in her 20s. And so
Hmm.
I look at her and I said, Leticia. And she said, yeah. And I'm like, do you remember me, Amber? And she goes, yeah. I'm like, do you remember, what that night and those nights that we spent together? She said, yeah. I've definitely thought about that. I was like, yeah, me too. And I said, how are you? And she said, I'm doing well. I'm in a relationship. I'm saving up to move to a different town. And I was like, wow, like that's amazing. I was like, do you want to hear something crazy? I said, I wrote a song about you. And I said, and it literally got done today. I turned over and I said, can I get your cell phone number? I'd love to share the song with you. And she just kind of looks at me like, for one, like, why would somebody write a song about me? But long story short, I get her cell phone number and I'm just like, it's good to see you and I'll be in contact. And so actually today, I know this is going to go out whenever, but I released the hip hop version and I texted her this morning and I said, hey, I just wanted to check in on you and how are you doing? And by the way, like the song's been released today and here's the link. And so she did text me back and I was a little surprised she texted me back. I was glad to see that. And she said, oh, awesome. I'm at work and I'll listen to it later. So I don't know. I said, please let me know your thoughts on it. But I mean, you can't make that stuff up. What are the chances
The
of
best
that?
script writer couldn't write that. That's just amazing.
Yeah, and it was so good for me to see that she's like okay.
Yes.
I mean, after all that, I did kind of wonder over the years, like how she was,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, I'll be waiting to hear like her thoughts on all of that. But
Yeah. What an amazing story about one song. And you got how many?
yeah.
The stories that, I mean, that we could tell about, I mean, and you're scratching the surface here. Like, there's a lot more to the story. That what you went through, God
Hmm.
only knows what she went through in the last 4 years. Love to hear that story as well.
Mm.
What the
Mhm.
meaning of those days were with you and that transition from gonna be homeless to actually have a place. I mean, headphones in, you know, that mindset of headphones in, like, yeah, I'm able to get some distance from all the pain.
Mhm.
So good. I'm looking forward to all the responses that will come in from the song and people that can relate to that reality.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
headphones
absolutely.
in, can't.
So, what was it like for you to like watch me and be a part of that process with me as a younger, a newer artist, flows with
Yeah,
insecurities? You know the story. You can relate to the story of Leticia.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was her, many times. What strikes me about the story is just your absolute perseverance. You know, if you talk about your inviting Leticia to come home, perseverance, courage, care, love, inspiration for the song, insecurity, on Olympic level. I shouldn't be doing this. I can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then not only am I going to do it, but I'm going to do it like really good. I'm going to like vet producers and I'm going to spend time and I'm going to take time and I'm going to spend money and I'm going to spend energy and I'm going to keep at this thing until I get to a place where I'm okay. And then, you know, you create a website and you create, Pandora and you create, all this stuff so that you can then release these babies, if you will, these songs into the world for people to have the experience of the inspiration and the care that's embedded in them. So the thing that I saw was the profound perseverance. And knowing you for a while, I know what your backstory is. So I know that the hurdle of being that kind of perseverance is like when I look at my backstory, it's like, yeah, well, how did I really get here? I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know how it happened. I'm just like, but I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't give up. I kept going. A lot of people choose to give up. And so that's why I'm so excited about the response to the song because of what it required for you to get it there.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a story. And I hope that people listening will take that in and be like, you have the courage today to change your life. Today. That's all you got. You don't got yesterday. Tomorrow's not here. But today you can take one little small step toward that thing that you want ultimately. And you did that 10,000 times over to create, headphones and then release it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that perseverance and that care and that courage is inspiring from my perspective. And having had a front row seat to watch that
Mm-hmm.
was also inspiring to see somebody who just would not stop. It was inspiring to me.
I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, perseverance is an interesting thing because I look back and I was very scared in it all. I mean, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I feel like I was just trying to figure it out along the way. I mean, I really was. But there's something in me, and I don't know how to explain it. It's like this force that just pulls and it pulls and it pulls, and it's just like, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. And I'm like, some days I'm like, I don't really want to, and this is difficult, and I feel like I'm hitting brick walls left and right. But there's something about that pull. It's like if I would have just ignored it, I feel like it would have been more uncomfortable than to actually just follow it and keep
Yep.
pursuing it because I don't know the why behind it.
Mhm.
But then through this, I have heard other people's stories. Like your song really resonated with me and it hit me in a way that, like, oh yeah, it reminded me of my youth and that I used to use music to, escape the chaos. And then they're opening up to me about their stories that they don't really tell everybody. I don't, music magic, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
It's just,
Right.
it's powerful there.
That draw that you're talking about, from my perspective, is one of the things that makes artists artists. They can't not. With all of the energy and obstacles that exist, that are very real,
Hmm. Hmm.
they can't stop.
Hmm.
And it reminds me of not to compare you to Mozart, but it reminds me of Mozart that he didn't write his symphonies like other people did, where he worked on them for long periods of time and sat at a piano and he would have an inspiration. He would hear the music in his head and then would go to his billiards table and he'd write it down uncorrected,
Hmm.
like just a download, like some inspiration would hit him, and that's how he wrote music. Well, that's not how everybody did it.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
would labor for years to write a symphony. He'd like labor for a night, probably hung over based on what I read about him. But you know, but that's an extreme version of exactly what you're talking about. The inspiration to invite Leticia to your home, the impact of her being in your home, the impact of the emotional reality of that connected with you, connected with her, resonation. Then the lyrics come by inspiration, that won't leave you alone. You keep hearing them. And then you're like, I need to write this down. And then you write a song. And then next thing you know, you got lyrics. And then next thing you know, you start writing the music. And the next thing you're talking to producers and they're adding their stuff to it. Now we got this thing. Headphones, the song, times two, one version and another. And like, that's years of intensity. People hear the song, but I believe that stuff comes through when it needs to the people listening, and that's why music is such a powerful force. It can communicate things that are so subtle and so unspoken, but so powerful.
Hmm.
Which is why it's so beautiful that you persevered into this place and did it. And now we're talking about it. And I think this kind of conversation is equally important to the song. People want to know, well, where'd that come from?
Hmm.
Why? Why two versions? Well, now you know.
Wasn't the plan.
Yeah, and it wasn't like you sat down and said, "Hey, I'm going to write this song. I'm going to do two versions." And here, It's never that way. It unfolds, and you have to have the courage and the perseverance to keep following. As one
Yeah.
of my mentors used to say, you got to follow the scent. Just keep
Mhm.
following the scent. You don't really know where you're going. You just got to follow the scent. Where
Mhm.
enough information to make you take a couple steps, but that's it. You don't
Yeah.
know the ultimate destination.
Yeah. And I think it's normal to be scared in that. I think it's normal to feel insecure and question yourself. I mean, multiple times. Probably the majority of the time I did that. So, yeah.
Well,
But
from my perspective, if you're not questioning yourself or feeling insecure, it's because you're in denial.
that's a whole other conversation there.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on and
Yeah,
taking the
absolutely.
time to just like have that conversation, but also just thank you for being a part of this process with me and being a
Absolutely.
huge support system and being the eyes and ears I get to share these journeys with too. So I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. My pleasure to be part of the ride. It was quite enjoyable to see the process.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye bye.